Yo, what is up guys? It is esports content entertainment coming at you guys with another video here today. And in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys my LCS 2023 Spring Split Playoffs recap. So, the LCS 2023 Spring Split will be concluding this Sunday. On Saturday, for the third place match, we will be watching FlyQuest take on Golden Guardians, and the winner of that match will face off against Cloud9 on Sunday. But the key thing to remember is that the winner of the FlyQuest and the Golden Guardians matchup will go with Cloud9 to represent the LCS at MSI 2023. And the reason why I didn't initially do a separate video for the first week of the LCS 2023 Spring Split Playoffs was simply because I was really busy during that week. So I announced this on my Cloud9 podcast that I was going to be covering the first 2 weeks of the LCS 2023 Spring Split Playoffs all in one video, just like this. That way, for people who didn't also, watch the first initial BO5s, and then they were also watching now the other BO5s to catch up for this upcoming finals weekend for the LCS 2023 Spring Split, you could also now hear my opinion about what has been going on for the LCS. But the very key thing here to talk about before we actually talk about the playoffs so far in general for the LCS 2023 Spring Split is that, yes, I do know about the news regarding Bjergsen and CLG. I will be doing other videos covering all of that news actually. The reason why I haven't got to it yet was because I've just been very busy. As you guys know, I run my main YouTube channel, and that has been requiring me to do a whole load of different videos as well. And this channel, with all of the news that has been coming up recently, is also going to be having me do a lot of videos as well. But I know you guys like hearing me talk about, the LCS, the LEC, the LCK, and the LPL. So let's put something into key context right now before we start talking about the matches in general. Pretty much for the LCS, regarding like the teams and the actual regional strength of the LCS has actually been very, very bad. Like, even just how the playoffs have been going so far for the LCS during the LCS 2023 Spring Split is that, pretty much by week 4 or week 5 of the LCS 2023 Spring Split regular season is that we kind of already knew who the best teams were. It was between FlyQuest and Cloud9. And then you also had EG kind of like holding on there. And then after like they got sick, they started losing a bunch of games. And then that allowed for, teams like, 100 Thieves and CLG to kind of climb up the rankings actually. Golden Guardians had that little bit of a hot streak early on, which pretty much just guaranteed them a playoff spot in general just from that, right? Then you also had 100 Thieves getting that really clutch win streak toward the very end. They won their last, 7 out of 9 games or something like that, which was actually really, really good. They went on a 7-game winning streak, including the tiebreakers within that 7-game winning streak, right? Now, people were calling that fraudulent when you saw the actual playoff games, right? And that's the setting I want to go into for the LCS 2023 Spring Split Playoffs. So, now let's go look at the actual matches, and we're just going to go down one by one, from starting with round 1, then round 2, and then we will preview the Saturday matchup, FlyQuest versus Golden Guardians for round 3. Alright, so, starting with FlyQuest versus 100 Thieves, which was the very first matchup. This was a matchup that you pretty much knew FlyQuest were going to win. I know that a lot of people have this hard on for what 100 Thieves did toward the very end of the LCS 2023 Spring Split, but keep in mind, guys, some of those games that they won were very much losable games from their position. We're talking like the team that had the lead threw so hard that it allowed 100 Thieves to actually win. Now, give or take, you really can't plan for that, but look at that TSM game. That TSM game is very telling by how bad 100 Thieves actually were. 100 Thieves were very sus throughout the split. I just don't think Tenacity's all that good right now. Bucio's been pretty much whack. If I'm just being completely honest here, he had a single game, maybe 2 single games, if I'm being completely honest here. Closers had a pretty bad split overall, was kind of clutch in those various key games that they needed to win. Bjergsen was bad last year. I really don't know why they opted into taking him, other than the complete obvious fact that Doublelift wanted to play with Bjergsen, right? Now, taking in Doublelift, you would think like, oh, okay, like Doublelift's probably washed, right? No, I still don't think he's as washed as a lot of people are thinking, right? But you're thinking to yourself like, okay, he's also kind of hindering them too, because looking at how they drafted versus how they played, you knew that shit was gonna get exposed in playoffs, right? Because it's very easy to kind of come up with a strong draft for just a BO1 when you're just prepping in general, than to obviously replicate that success 2 more games in a row to win a BO, or obviously to win a, BO5, which you have to win 3 games, obviously, right? So it's one of these things about how the rankings were structured, because since 100 Thieves defeated CLG in the tiebreaker, that means that CLG will play up against Cloud9, and that means FlyQuest would face off against 100 Thieves. Basically, first plays 4th, second plays 3rd, and then you have 5th and 6th also facing off against each other from the higher seeds from that bracket, right? So then in the first matchup between FlyQuest versus the 100 Thieves, it's one of these things where in game 1, I remember they got completely just blown out completely. The Vigar pick really threw them off their game. What was really telling in that FlyQuest versus 100 Thieves series is that they kept picking Jinx and Thresh, right? So even all the way into the Golden Guardian series, that still wasn't working for them. I really don't know why they kept picking Jinx and Thresh. They were like 0 and 4 on it, and I still don't understand, if Doublelift is gonna pick late game hyperscaling ADCs, why not pick champions like Tristana, Aphelios, champions like that? Because Doublelift was bragging that these teams had to ban out his ADCs. Now keep in mind, the teams that were banning out his ADCs were teams that they were on paper better than, right? So yeah, if teams like Immortals and Team Liquid and Dignitas are banning out your champions, yeah, they're not good teams, so that's the only real way they can get an advantage playing up against those teams in general, right? Then you saw when they faced off against TSM, barring TSM completely throwing that game, the Xayah pick that Wild Turtle had was very effective, right? So it's one of these things where, yeah, if you would have to inherently target ban him because he's their strongest player, but as it was shown in the Golden Guardian series, if you don't target ban him and just ban out closers champions, they really had no edge to them, Like if you look at their playoff series outside of the Golden Guardians one, that FlyQuest one really exposed them for just how, not only just how bad their drafting is, but for how linear and one-dimensional the team actually is. Tenacity, I swear, it was one of these, he built Merc Treads before actually going to a Rift Herald fight they knew they were going to take. So the reason why you don't take the Merc Treads on your Scion pick is because you will be inherently less tanky in the fight. You're going to need those durable stats in the fight to actually survive, okay? This guy builds Merc Treads, and this is the problem you get when you bring in a rookie, right? Now, this is going to happen anyway. Like I mentioned before in the preseason, right? This was going to happen when you bring in rookies. They're just not going to know how to deal with the playoff situation and the pressure of a playoff series just in general, right? Busio, he had like a few good Thresh hooks here and there. He had that one good game on Blitzcrank that I thought was actually really impressive, which we'll talk about that later on when we get to the Golden Guardian series, right? But against FlyQuest, what was really telling about how they exposed 100 Thieves was their front-to-back team fighting. What was something I've always kept bringing up with 100 Thieves throughout the entire split? Their front-to-back team fighting is very, 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 very bad, and it was exposed really hard when they let the Cassante and the Wukong get into their backline and just constantly wreck them. That was in game 2. Then in game 3, that also happened where 100 Thieves got a lead, but were never substantially ahead enough to actually push anything, and then FlyQuest just ran them down, right? Then, outside of the FlyQuest series, you know that FlyQuest are still not even looking that good, so if they face off against Cloud9, that's definitely not going to be, obviously, in the best bet of FlyQuest, but it's easy for a team like FlyQuest to look good against 100 Thieves, because, like, obviously, if you look at how the players have been playing, they should match up fairly well to each other. I think the edge slightly goes to FlyQuest in that, and that's the reason why the series was lopsided, because you have the top lane difference between impact and tenacity. It doesn't really matter in that situation if Ayla is playing for FlyQuest, because Busio is also almost just as bad as him, so it's kind of just a net negative for both teams anyway, right? So then FlyQuest defeat 100 Thieves 3-0. There was the game 2 where they were 6,000 gold ahead, but they obviously weren't ever keeping track of like the Cassante and the Wukong flanks, and Bjergsen obviously was the weakest mid laner pretty much going into the playoffs anyway. Like, Bjergsen was just pretty much a nothing burger almost the entire split, outside of like the Talia games he had, and those Azir games and the Talia games he had were like pretty good. But outside of that, he was just really bad in general. Like, I still don't know why they got him. Even if Doublelift wanted him. Bjergsen was bad last year. What did they think was going to happen taking this guy? You know? I mean, this was to be expected, right? Then you have Cloud9 facing off against CLG. Now, remember, guys, CLG was the only team last year in the LCS 2022 summer split to take Cloud9 to, obviously, 5 games. Everyone else got beaten rather pretty much easily, right? Cloud9 went 3-2 against CLG, 3-1 against 100 Thieves, and then obviously 3-0 against 100 Thieves in the finals, right? So it seems like they were just scaling up with each series, right? This series was very, very sloppy from Cloud9, like giving Blabber Maokai that many games. Like, you saw a lot of macro mistakes from Cloud9. You saw just like a lot of indecisiveness, a lot of sloppy just engages, a lot of sloppy team fighting. But it seems to be that throughout most of the LCS history, speaking of CLG now, C9 and CLG have had this weird rivalry where, like, it's always really competitive between them, right? And you've seen that happen before. And the thing with CLG that's plagued them in that series was not only just indecisiveness, bad drafting, not knowing when to fully pressure a lead, not knowing when to dive correctly. And this is something that I'll talk about later on in the other series against EG as well. CLG has had these problems all split long. They got 4th, and it was like, I guess, are they the 4th best team? I don't really know. The LCS looks pretty fucking bad, right? So yeah, Cloud9, really sloppy in that series. Berserker, I think, was their stand-up performer in the series as well. But the issue here with Cloud9 is you think to yourself, well, they struggled against CLG last summer and then just got better with the next series, right? And then, obviously, when we get to round 2, we'll talk about that more, right? So those are the first 2 matches from the winners bracket in round 1. FlyQuest just dismantle 100 Thieves. Struggle in game 2, but otherwise just, you know, they're the better team in general. C9 versus CLG. C9 played really, really scrappy, just disgustingly bad macro against CLG. But then, just, like, you could even tell, they released that VoiceCom video, they weren't happy about that CLG win at all. And you could definitely tell in the FlyQuest series, things got definitely cleaned up, right? Now with the losers bracket, you had 100 Thieves versus Golden Guardians. Now, Golden Guardians are a team where Licorice was almost by far and away one of the worst players of the LCS 2023 Spring Split regular season. I mean, he was pretty bad. There was a game where Golden Guardians gave him Lee Sin top, and the Lee Sin top pick was essentially doing nothing but just kicking the Jax away in lane. No, I shit you not. It was so disgusting watching him play that his engages were really bad. His TPing timing was so off. This is crazy because Licorice used to be one of the best top laners in the LCS when he was on Cloud9. So seeing him play that bad was essentially just jarring. You know, he wasn't even this bad last year. He played pretty decently fine last year, right? But then looking at the split, he was just almost running it down, right? So in this series, you were like, everyone thought 100 Thieves was going to be Golden Guardians. I did too. I had 100 Thieves winning this, right? Because Golden Guardians have shown a lot of weaknesses. But then you have to keep this in mind. Gory, stronger mid laner than Bjergsen throughout the split. River and Closer have been pretty much neck and neck for the most part, with the slight edge going to River, because I think the peaks of River were a lot higher than Closer's from the split. 6A and Huhi versus Doublelift and Busio, pretty much, I guess you just kind of flip a coin, but the slight edge does go to Golden Guardians with Huhi in that aspect, right? Huhi used to play for 100 Thieves, and Huhi's the only 100 Thieves member to actually get to finals weekend over his other players, because, you know, some days out of the playoffs now, Closer's out of the playoffs, Abadage's, you know, out of playoff contention with Excel, you know, who else was it? FBI out of play contention on EG as well with Someday, right? So Huhi the lone standing guy from 100 Thieves last year getting to finals weekend. And the series of Golden Guardians and 100 Thieves, I think this was probably the most exciting series, of the playoffs so far, barring what's going to happen in finals weekend. What I did like about this series was not just the gameplay itself, because the gameplay was abysmally bad. The Blitzcrank pick. What I don't understand is why don't more players pick stuff like Blitzcrank for other lanes? Like direct stuff that are direct counters to champions, but they don't pick it because it's not meta. But then you go and review like the patch notes. These champions are definitely strong. These teams just don't pick them, We've seen that happen with Blitzcrank and a few other champions that have gotten play recently. Like, why is Cassiopeia not getting played? Why is champions like Twisted Fate not seeing more play? Why is champions like Nico, Syndra not seeing more play? Why is champions, like Yone and Jace have come in, right? But, Jace is more of a situational meta pick. He comes in and out of the meta in the mid lane. Yone's pretty strong, but has shown he struggles in a lot of matchups too. And Talia's shown up too. Aurelion Sol has, I'm not saying the mid lane picks have been just like, super just like only these champions, like with Victor and Orianna and Azir usually. But why don't other champions like this get picked more? I just don't get it. Like, if that inherently does give you a drafting edge. You saw it in the 100 Thieves series with Golden Guardians that when they picked Blitzcrank and won that hard, you're like, okay, they have the edge in draft now. Now Golden Guardians have to either ban that or they first pick it themselves, and they started first picking themselves with Huhi, and you kind of wonder, like, why don't more teams do that, though? I don't know what is the issue with picking champions that are obviously not like S tier. There's a bunch of A tier champions that are also really good, too, in all the positions, right? There's various champions in the game that directly counter other champions. Teams just don't pick them because they're not going to give you the most optimal chance of winning, but that is an optimal chance of winning is picking a champion that directly counters another champion. That is going to give you a chance at winning, even more having that drafting edge in your favor, Like, we saw it with certain teams that can pick Draven over other teams, right? If a team can't play Draven and the other enemy ADC can play Draven, that's an edge you get. Now, the biggest takeaway from the 100 Thieves versus Golden Guardian series is Doublelift going out to CS a minion and then just griefing the game. You had Stixxay with his big play. A lot of people remember that one. And, like, you think with players like Bjergsen, players like Doublelift, they can easily close out this game. But then, somehow they're ahead in the game. They're like 10 kills ahead. Goalies slightly in their favor. And they're the ones that are on the back foot, like, wondering, like, okay, are we gonna choke? Is the pressure getting to us? All those things, right? And then Golden Guardians managed to actually beat them. They pull off the upset. Stixxay stopping Doublelift in a spring split. Well, Stixxay and Hui stopping Doublelift in a spring. What's crazy is both of them. Yeah, I remember it was Bjergsen and Doublelift TSM too. Stixxay and Hui stopping Bjergsen and Doublelift from winning a spring split yet again. This happened in the LCS 2016 spring split finals when it was TSM versus CLG, right? So looking at the Golden Guardians roster pull off the upset, you're thinking to yourself, they're going to definitely ride that momentum into their next matchup against either EG or CLG, right? So it was one of these things also where 100 Thieves got exposed again for, like, if you ban out. Well, because it was also shown in the series, if you do give closer Viego, he will still just rip you apart, right? So it's one of those things where, what does 100 Thieves do now that they're officially out, right? Because we'll talk about them now that they're officially out. 100 Thieves are officially out. Bjergsen is obviously done. I'll talk about that in a video later on, right? Bjergsen is done, right? So what do you do with this roster? Do you allow Tenacity to start playing more carry champions? Does Busio get a lot more say in how the lanes ran with Doublelift? Do they even play Doublelift, right? Who do they get for mid lane, right? 100 Thieves are going to have to go through some changes coming up for the LCS 2023 summer split. Like, I knew it wasn't going to happen with Bjergsen to the point where, like, he was going to be performing very well. Anybody who watched last year could tell you that, right? But what happens with them now? They would have to play towards more top, right? Tenacity was known as that carry top laner. He had that one Fiora game during the split where he actually played pretty well. It was probably his best game of the split, right? Just in general, because playoffs sure wasn't cutting it, right? Like, do you play more towards that? And can the mid laner have better synergy with closer than Bjergsen? Because Bjergsen and closer had bad synergy. It was horrible, right? It was pretty darn bad, right? So now, does this open closer to more of a carry potential now that you don't have Bjergsen on the team, right? Because Bjergsen was essentially a net negative given his bad gameplay, right? Doublelift, I think, is still a viable option to play through. Like, it's kind of just, like, reckless. If you allow him to scale up to, like, 30 minutes of the game, you give him his items, it showed that he can carry games, you know? But in laning phase, it's looking pretty rough out there, right? So, the next series in round 1 would be CLG versus EG. There's really nothing to say about that series, guys. The EG just kind of wiped CLG off the map. It was just so bad. And now that CLG is out of the league, it just kind of sucks that their very last playoff series ever were just super disappointing. You know, having that really close series against Cloud9 only to just get murdered by EG. And then, you know, did EG look so good in their series against CLG, or was CLG just not showing up to play? I mean, you could also kind of wonder, like, were they let known of the, you know, brand acquisition from NRG to the point where, like, that mentally affected their play against EG? Who knows? Very possible, right? But, you know, EG just wiped CLG out. Their very last playoff series ever, they go down 0-3. Crazy. Then we're on to round 2. Cloud9 versus FlyQuest, you know, and you're thinking to yourself, the MVP conversation is Berserker versus Prince, right? Prince looked really good at the beginning part of the split with Winsome, but then when Prince had Ayla, who's been, like, turbo sprinting it the entire, like, time he's been on FlyQuest, it's been pretty bad. Like I said before, like, they opted in to play Ayla because they already committed to him already, right? I would simply just get rid of Ayla if FlyQuest don't win against Golden Guardians, or just get rid of Ayla in general because he's really bad, right? Which is crazy because he looked really good when he was playing with Yeon and Harry on Team Liquid Academy. And this is something that I've also mentioned too, is like, if you have good bot lanes together with that kind of synergy, you want to kind of keep that together. And I think that's why Ayla has not looked as good, because he's not playing with Yeon, but that might also be conjecture looking at him play with Yeon versus how he's played with FlyQuest, right? Because with FlyQuest, he definitely has much better players to play with on FlyQuest, with Impact and Spica and Prince, right? These are better players you could hopefully play around with on FlyQuest. But remember, guys, just because they're better players doesn't mean they're all going to get along with each other. Synergy is going to also match up together as well. There was a game during the LCS 2023 spring split where Vikla played visibly really bad, and Song came up on stage and it kind of looked like he was just kind of like reaming into him. And Vikla has also, with Prince, started to not look as good. Vikla more than Prince, because it's still very shown that if Prince does have a way, it's very still shown that Prince can still play very well, right? Now, the difference here with Prince and Berserker is people are just going back and forth on who is the MVP. And after that series, because Cloud9 were definitely just murdering FlyQuest, Berserker definitely put him down. Now, C9 made the mistakes of, it was when Berserker was ahead in game 3, he was all by himself for some reason, and then he just dies. Then Cloud9 tried fighting that dragon fight, which Captain Flowers pointed out was really stupid, which he was right. Fighting out was really stupid. They had no damage to fight in that dragon fight. But just other than that, everyone else played really well in that series, and Cloud9 for sure are the front runners to win the LCS 2023 Spring Split. As you guys know, huge fan of Cloud9. Can't wait to potentially have that 6th trophy. Can't wait for it, you know? So super happy about the org and the results of the split. I had them at 2nd. I had them finishing at least top 2 coming at this point, right? Because I even said my spring split rankings really aren't just reflective of the regular season itself. It's also how I think it'll pan out for the rest of the split as well. Like, when everything is said and done, this is a team that can definitely contest for a title. Cloud9 being one of them. I had EG first, and they kind of finished on like 5th. You know, we'll have to see how that plays out next split, right? So yeah, outside of those few mistakes, Cloud9 played really, really well. Fudge has been great himself for the LCS in and of itself, for how well he's been playing. I hope that they can take home the trophy this weekend, because I think they definitely are the best team right now in the LCS. And they are going to MSI regardless of the result of this finals weekend. Then we talk about Golden Guardians versus EG. Pretty darn bad. You know, from EG's point of view, EG's drafting is horrible. JoJo Peon having a really, really suspect split. You know, Someday having a really off split. Inspired looked really, really good. Beginning part of the split kind of fell off a cliff toward the very end of it. FBI and Vulcan started off really strong. Now, like later on, as the split went by, have shown that they have some synergy issues with each other. Maybe they're not as crisp on how they want to play the lane like they were when they first started playing together. Like I said before, FBI and Vulcan on paper should be one of the best bot lanes in the LCS. Vulcan making just such brain dead mistakes, obviously in the EG series. Golden Guardians riding that momentum from their 100 Thieves upset win into the EG series, and I think that would also go forward into the series that I'm going to go over right now, which is the FlyQuest versus EG series. Sorry, FlyQuest versus Golden Guardian series. Is why wouldn't Golden Guardians win the series, though? I know more people are predicting for FlyQuest, but just based off the recent gameplay between both teams, Golden Guardians should win. Like, Golden Guardians currently are playing better. Vikla has looked massively worse than Gory. River can definitely take on Spica. You have Licorice versus Impact. That would still be Impact favored. Then you have the bot lanes, right? Well, Prince and Ayla have shown that they are not very happy playing with each other. The bot lane is pretty much just a mess between the two of them. 6A and Huhi, despite being, I guess you could say, in theory, worser bot lane, have shown that they can definitely play very well together, right? They did play together at one point on CLG, and it looks like they still enjoy playing with each other, actually. So, my thing here right now is, I think Golden Guardians should win this series, honestly, 3-1. There's nothing really here for FlyQuest to win. Like, if Prince have some massive games, yeah, I can see it going to 5 games. If Prince gets, like, Jinx or Aphelios, and they ultimately play all in for Prince, protect this guy, get this guy a laning phase, dive bot lane with Rift Herald at like around 15 minutes. You know, Spica's going to bot lane, putting all his resources bot. I think that's how they get their edge. I don't think they could get their edge anywhere else because Spica and Vikla's synergy is not there. Spica's synergy with Impact, also not there. These are all the issues I brought up with FlyQuest coming into the split. Is these players are all good to a certain extent. You know, I was still going off the Ayla Academy results, right? But the thing here is, you're also thinking, like, this is going to be kind of an off team as well, given I don't think the roster was constructed horrible, but it was also constructed, like, how does Impact balance out with Spica? That would be kind of like not a good topside duo. So that's my thing here is, yes, Golden Guardians, if they actually beat FlyQuest, would represent North America, but it's like, you want FlyQuest to represent more because you think, like, the players on paper will do better internationally than Golden Guardians, right? But the thing here, guys, if FlyQuest's already having bad scrims right now against, like, NA teams, how would that work out against international teams? Remember, guys, you scrim international teams. Now, if they have, like, Korean boot camps or whatever, however they're going to scrim, like, Asian teams, they might not even get top teams to scrim them from the LCK, right? But the thing here, guys, to remember is that won't matter. Because if they scrim, like, LPL teams and get fisted, they might just be mentally done before they even play their first games on stage, right? So, if Golden Guardians are more resilient, and Golden Guardians have the confidence, 6A said, they think they can win it all. They're not beating Cloud9, let's be honest here, but that confidence is going to take them, I think, over the edge of FlyQuest right now. FlyQuest have looked really bad, guys. Outside of that 100 Thieves series where even that was like, ooh, this is looking kind of funky. Ayla is just bad. You know, and I don't think FlyQuest will have the mental fortitude needed to kind of represent NA well. I just don't. I mean, Impact will. I think Prince will hold up well. I just don't think players like Spica and Ayla and Vikla will hold up very well when they get turbo fisted in scrims. Remember, guys, if they're losing scrims a lot, that's going to look even worse when they're playing up against Asian teams. The same could be said about Golden Guardians, but seeing how Golden Guardians have played out this playoff so far, it's been good. Now, remember, guys, the thing with Golden Guardians I want to make sure I mention in this video is this is their best season ever, right? They had never won a playoff series before this. They've now, even if they lose against FlyQuest, they'll have finished in their highest placing ever, which is 3rd, and they've won 2 playoff series, so this is already a good season for them in general, right? So, yes, what do you guys think currently about the LCS 2023 Spring Split Playoffs. Who do you have winning the LCS 2023 Spring Split Finals weekend? FlyQuest, Cloud9, or Golden Guardians? I think whoever faces Cloud9 is getting 3-1 or 3-0 anyway. But for me personally, it is kind of a meme if Golden Guardians go, but I would personally like the more confident team going to MSI, representing North America, than the team with a weak mental state, with a bad support, where if they get fisted in scrims, it's going to look pretty bad on stage. But yes, I have more content coming for you guys. Plenty of news videos to drop for you guys. See you guys later. Like, comment, and subscribe. Most of all, enjoy. I am MSK, and this is Esports Content Entertainment, your one place for esports content. Sorry, this video is coming out late. Hopefully, you have this to watch before the finals games kick off. See you guys later. Deuces. Peace.